let's get started. Not sure if it's morning for everybody everywhere, but we'll figure that out as we go through. I appreciate y'all joining us today for our second Leadership Exchange event of 2021, hosted by the Scottish Development International team. As folks join us, please pop your name, your company, and where in the world you're located today in the chat box, and we can get to know who we have in the virtual room before we get underway. If we haven't met yet, I'm Kara Toronto, Chief Operating Officer at TAO, and I'm joined by Riley O'Brien, our Vice President of Events and Experiences, who you are welcome to contact through the chat messaging should you have any questions during this program. So we have a couple of rules of engagement before we start. Not that we aren't all Zoom experts at this point, but all of our participants have been muted. If you prefer to ask a question or respond in the chat box, you can do that both publicly or privately. Privately, if you direct your message to Riley, that would be fantastic. And we'll monitor the chat box and respond during the discussion, and also collect any questions that may arise that we don't get to stop our presenters and ask during their chat. So we're going to ask you to engage via the participant icon on your screen if you'd like to speak during the presentation, but I will leave that to our presenters to determine whether or not they want to break up the flow of their slides and their speech. And then feel free to join us on video during this event. I think at this point, we all know that speaking into this blank void is less exciting than seeing some smiling, nodding faces. So we would love to see all of you this morning. Engage with us on social media during the call and throughout the day. We love sharing what's happening at TAO and to get participant takeaways from our events. So if you hear any nuggets, tweet those out. And then we have a few really exciting upcoming events that we want to highlight for the folks here today. I can't believe it's June already, but on June 10th, we have our I Am Tech Oregon series, which is featuring Catherine Hines, a UX designer at member company Extensis. And then on June 16th, we're having our last member mix before we take a summer hiatus that's featuring Lane Workforce Partnership. And then June 21st through 24th is our Techlandia Summit 21. It's a really interesting 4-day deep dive into different sectors and how the digitization of the world has affected them over the past 18 months. Then to round out June, on the 30th, we're going to have our impact event. So it's a talent and culture focus featuring conversations with Jim Cook, formerly of Mozilla, a panel presentation focused on eliminating hidden bias in job descriptions, and then a question and answer with regional people professionals about attracting, growing, and sustaining talent within their tech companies, which we know is a super critical issue right now. So then if you would like to further explore our TAO events, which are ours and our partners, please check out the calendar of events at techoregon.org/events. And Riley has been dropping all these links into the chat for easy access and something to do once we're finished this morning. All right, pause and breath. COVID has changed a lot of processes, practices, and systems for how companies work, but nothing quite tops the radical change that came with supporting a remote workforce and possibly the new idea that companies don't have to be headquarter-centric to be successful. We are delighted to welcome the team from Scottish Development International as the hosts for today's Leadership Exchange, as they have seen a lot of changes and challenges lifted in the landscape of global expansion. So Usman Ghani and Melina Hernandez have been a delight to work with on this programming, and I am going to pause and hand it over to them.
Thanks, Kara. Thank you for the intro. And good morning, everyone, and good evening to my colleagues who are based in Scotland. My name is Usman Ghani, and I'm based in SDI Calgary office, and we are part of wider Americas team with my colleague Melina, based in Houston. So I think today's session is about introducing Scotland as an inward investment destination. We'd be happy to kind of take you through, with the help of our colleagues, to different organizations and the whole ecosystem that's really driving our digital transformation in the future. So maybe if you could put up the slide, Melina. So yeah, just to kind of, give you a brief introduction of this featured speakers today. So we are joined by Graham Hatton, who is our business development leader for wider tech. And he's based in Scotland and kind of work with our global team across different geographies within different continents and uh, work to help companies set up in Scotland. And we are joined by Karen Meechan, who is interim CEO for Scotland IS, which is uh, really the trade organization that is driving digital transformation for Scotland. Next is Mark Wilkinson, who is head of business development for the Data Lab, the Data and AI Innovation Hub for Scotland. And then I'm joined by Jonathan Lewis, who is based in San Jose and kind of covers our lead generation activities from there. So next slide, please. Just a bit of a brief introduction about Scotland. I don't know how many of you have been to Scotland, but if you are, please feel free to kind of leave a comment in the chat box about your experience about Scotland. But Scotland is a small country relatively with about 5.5 million people, and out of which over 3 million people are part of active workforce. And thanks to Scotland's great universities, most of those individuals are professional, highly educated, highly skilled, and that's probably one of the reasons why we see an uptick of companies who are looking at talent and would want to set up in Scotland. Being part of the UK, the currency is pound sterling, with major industries that include financial services, energy, technology, tourism, and food and drink. So that's pretty much about a bit of an idea about the Scotland's landscape. And then moving on to SDI. So my colleague Jonathan Wilson will kind of cover our role in details and the services we offer. But in terms of a high level overview, so we as an economic development agency cover international trade that is related to Scottish company who are looking to expand their footprint globally. We help them set up in different geographies. And then next one is foreign investment, where we come in as an inward investment team where we work with international companies and help them set up in Scotland via different type of services. Next, please. Just a bit more about Scotland. Generally, what happens is that London within UK kind of overshadows whatever happening in different businesses, and for all the right reasons. And London is a great place to invest. But outside of London, according to EY Attractiveness Survey, Scotland is the most attractive region. And this rating has been constant for the past so many years, where we see Scotland kind of number 2 when it comes to attracting foreign direct investment. And that's pretty much evident in terms of the same survey, which kind of outline Edinburgh, Glasgow, and Aberdeen as the topmost top 10 cities for foreign direct investment in the UK. So considering the size of Scotland, that's a great achievement. This is reflected in Edinburgh, which is really emerging as a place for tech startup. I mean, every day there are like new startups emerging. We have seen increased VC activity in Edinburgh, where there are more and more VCs are investing more and more in this particular city. So all this kind of combine and creating a great ecosystem for companies or a value prop for companies to kind of look at this place to invest and grow their business. Now, why this is happening, and that's something that my colleagues are going to cover separately in different parts of this presentation. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Karen Meechan, who is, as I mentioned earlier, interim Chief Executive Officer for Scotland IS. So over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Riley, can we flick through to the first proper slide, please? Thank you. Thank you. And the next one. Thanks very much. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. For those of us who are here in Scotland, I am delighted to be here today and hope to shed some light on Scotland is and the tech sector in Scotland that we support. So a brief introduction, as Usman said, I'm Karen Meechan. I am the CEO of Scotland Is, and we are the trade body and cluster management organisation for Scotland's tech sector. We are an independent membership funded not-for-profit organisation who support upwards of 1,000 companies across the Scottish ecosystem. We work closely with Scottish and UK governments and their agencies and a number of international partners and advisors. So we have the likes of Vint Cerf from Google on our board and Colin McFarlane from Netflix. As the slide says, we aim to connect locally and reach globally. There are around 97,000 people employed within the tech sector in Scotland, and the industry is worth around 7.5 billion to the Scottish GDP. In 2020, there were around 11,000 digital tech businesses registered in Scotland, and most of the activities were focused on software and solutions. Looking at our members and the ecosystem, as I mentioned, we support around 1,000 companies across the ecosystem, fostering collaborations between members, government agencies and other international cluster organisations and companies. We work closely with all Scottish universities and college, again, to foster those partnerships between academia and industry. We do an annual health check, if you like, on the sector. And this year, although not everyone has weathered the pandemic as well as others, our membership are still 75% of them are still very optimistic for the year ahead, which is fantastic given the year that we've just had. Next slide, please, Riley. Thank you. So we have 13 universities, all who deliver specialist courses from AI and ethical hacking at Abertay University to robotics at Heriot-Watt. We have a thriving emerging tech sector with space tech, geospatial, GovTech, cyber, and of course climate tech. And as I've said, we have great relationships and support from government. And during the last 18 months, during the pandemic, we've worked very closely with them launching our Digital Nation programme. And that was looking at what fundamental changes did Scotland have to make if we were going to become a truly digital nation, and making sure that we got that feedback and buy-in from the sector to make sure that we done it all properly. We also launched the Connecting Scotland initiative, which was looking at the digital poverty within our most vulnerable citizens across Scotland. So that wasn't just our citizens who were ill and shielding, it was also looking at that education piece and the kids who didn't have access to devices or connectivity, who couldn't access their education during the pandemic. Skills, as with any trade bodies, absolute focus for Scotland is. Pre-COVID, we'd gone in with just over 13,000 jobs unfilled in our sector. Given the digital transformation that's happened over this last year or so, that number will only rise. However, there are a number of initiatives that we're involved in and others to combat this. So we created Code Clan, which is the first and only coding academy in Scotland. We have run for more than a decade our ePlacement Scotland programme, which gives paid placement availability to our students in colleges and university, but also helps build that talent pipeline for our SMEs. We created Digital Extra Fund, which is the only charity actually in Scotland to ensure that every child in Scotland has access to extracurricular coding activity, regardless of their location or their economic background. We are in the process just now of working to roll out a national programme to secure technical expertise in each of Scotland's high schools to make sure that they're bringing with them that support for our computer and science teachers, but also industry best practices, new technologies, ultimately to ensure that our young people who are leaving education have the skill sets that industry is going to need them to have when they become, into the workforce. Next slide, please, Riley. Thank you. As it says, Scotland is that one window to the tech sector in Scotland. We have access to over 600 experts in data and cyber through our clusters. Innovation is not just in Edinburgh. We have companies up and down the country, from Capgemini up in Inverness to Candatis on the beautiful Isle of Skye, who look at health tech and have pivoted to more recently into cyber. We have Oracle and Dundee who do app development, and we have Spire Global in Glasgow who work with customized data sets gathered from satellites in space. And of course, all of that is held together by great, most of the time, connectivity, affordable property and access to educated and skilled workforce. Next slide, please, Riley. Thank you. Scotland's emerging tech scene has immense potential and to become a pillar in our digital economy. Climate tech, gov tech, space tech and digital health are all areas that we can capitalise on in Scotland, and these sectors span across the whole of the digital sector. Next slide, please, Riley. Thank you. So, as you can see, these are some of the emerging tech sectors that we're currently working in and our members are working in. If we look at space tech, for example, in 2017, it was worth 2.5 billion. That aims to grow to 4 billion by 2030. We have 3 spaceports, one in US, one in Sutherland and one up in Shetland. The UK geospatial market is already worth 2.1 billion and Scottish companies are absolutely leading the way, and Mark will give you a bit more information on that through Data Lab. Public estimates that our GovTech market will be worth 20 billion by 2025. Scottish Government spending is due to increase, as you can see, to 877 million, but there is a year-on-year increase of 4.9%. So again, opportunities are huge, and our cyber revenues in the UK are now over 8.3 billion, which is up from 6 in just over 2 years ago. So as you can see, that kind of highlights the potential of these emerging sectors and why there is a focus on them. Next slide, please, Riley. Thank you. So you'll find more information there on our website, on our members, on the research that we've been doing, on the initiatives that we have been working on with government and other agencies, and including Data Lab and all of our other partners. But happy to take any questions, and hopefully that was a very, very quick, brief overview of a relatively large sector in Scotland.
Thank you, Karen. That's very helpful. And now I would like to invite Mark Wilkinson, Head of Business Development for the Data Lab. So over to you, Mark.
Hi, everybody. So my turn to give you a whistle-stop tour of what we do. So working closely with agencies like Karen's talked about there, we are effectively one of 7 innovation centres within Scotland, and we focus on data and AI for Scotland. And our reason for being is effectively to help leverage the academic expertise with public and private sector to generate economic and society benefit for Scotland as a whole. Next slide, please. So we've got a real focus on AI for good and making sure that we bring along the Scottish population with us. So some of the activity we do, just a couple of examples here. So Scotland is in the process, the government is just launching its national AI strategy. So that was launched officially in March this year, along with our help in facilitating that launch. And we've been asked to support the government as a partner in delivering and implementing that going forwards. So heavily involved with that. And then you'll see there, we have a collaborative with UNICEF. For looking at utilising data for benefit of children. That's not a Scotland-focused exercise, that's a global focus for that organisation. Next slide, please. Yeah, just click through, yeah. A couple more times, that's it, yeah, perfect. So the 3 kind of key areas that we split our activities into would be around supporting innovation, and we'll touch a little bit more on that in a second. Skills and talent, so I think Karen touched on there about how key education is as a focus for us as a nation, and we do a lot in that space that I can elaborate on in the next few slides. And then community events as well is key for us. So you'll see a kind of repeating theme with the presentation, I think, today about the sense of community and the network we have, and that's a key strength of Scotland as a place to come and engage with and join that community and have access to other stakeholders within that community. Next slide, please. So how could we help you thrive in Scotland? One of the areas that we help around that supporting innovation piece, we have some internal funds ourselves, which we can use for seeding innovation. So typically less than 20K. And we help, I'm not going to go through all the numbers here, but it'll give you a feel for some of the volume of impact that we do. But we look to help organizations with innovation, either by the funding on its own, or we have an internal data science team as well, which we can include in that innovation project if we believe that will help it be successful. And then I think a more expanding area for us is the ability for us to support applications for larger funding opportunities. So if you come to Scotland and have a presence in Scotland as an organisation, effectively we can help you optimize applications for UK-wide funding. So through organisations like Innovate UK, there's smart grant applications, there's European funding. We can help you make sure that you have the best chance of success of that application. And again, there's an opportunity, if we feel that we could add weight to your application and the consortium that's going for funding, then we're happy to become part of that consortium. And if that adds weight, then all to the better. So we're starting to see some really good, we've had a focus probably for the last 18 months, a serious focus on this area. So within my team, I've got a couple of members who are dedicated specifically to this activity, and we're starting to see a real impact now. We've got 3 applications we've helped put forward on the table at the moment that are 5 million plus each. Next slide, please. So what about the talent? So you've already heard today about the quality of talent we have in Scotland. And we come at this from several angles. First of all, the master's students. So we have 160 sponsored students this year across 12 universities and around about 30 courses. So you've got a real breadth there of different tastes of data science. And what we do is we work with them not only just to sponsor them, but to help them with soft skills, so that when they engage with industry, they're not such a cold start for you. So for example, helping them understand the skills around when they're sitting within a business, being able to relate business benefit to the data science projects that they're maybe proposing and looking for funding for within their business. So things like that. And one of the other pieces we do with these students is we put them up for an opportunity of an industrial placement. So a 2 to 3 month project with industry. And that gives you an opportunity to access that talent for a specific project to start off. It gives them obviously experience of industry, and it also gives industry access to the latest talent with the latest processes and tools and knowledge coming out of that data science academic arena. And then beyond that, obviously, if you engage with a student from an industrial placement perspective, you then have an opportunity to look at whether that student wants to join you on a more permanent basis. We do also have industrial doctorates, tend to be for more kind of deep dive research and development sort of roles. It's on a smaller scale than our MSc program, but again, we look to do joint funding opportunities with industry along those, and you've got a couple of examples there of organisations that we've dealt with in the past on that basis. And then leadership training, so more and more we're focusing on how we can also help our small and medium enterprise business entities within Scotland grasp data and AI and the opportunities with data and AI. And the leadership training is really about helping business leaders understand how they can implement a data strategy and align it with their business strategy, putting a team in place, bringing real world problems to the table that we can work on together, and introducing them to the community network as well. So maybe to other organizations that walked that path before them and can help them and give them advice on ways forward and maybe pitfalls to avoid. We also have a more self-serve opportunity with online learning. So we have courses around driving values from data available online for people to access and utilize. 4 weeks roughly we kind of aim at for people to be able to complete those. We're creating new content all the time, actually, and we do that either in conjunction with some of the universities in Scotland or other agencies, but driving value from data is the key one we have at the moment. We're doing one on AI, and we're also working with Edinburgh University on entrepreneurship-based data course as well. And we're going through a process at the moment of how we badge and add accreditation to those courses, both industrial accreditation and academic. And looking for international partners to surface this content as well. We, like you can see here, we're talking to a Canadian university at the moment, and we've also got an industrial partner with potentially give us access to the Middle East for this sort of content, and also an Eastern European opportunity. And then apprenticeships, so part of our driving value from data component, for example, is part of a digital pilot's license, which is being piloted with modern apprenticeships in Scotland at the moment. So the idea is, if that's successful, all modern apprenticeships within Scotland will have that as a component of what they do. Next slide, please. So community, again, we've touched on that. We can act very similar to some of the other organisations you're going to hear from. I was going to say this evening because it's this evening for us, but no, it's this morning for you guys. So this morning, but specifically around that data and AI community, we can act as a gateway in. We don't pretend to be the answer to all your potential needs or requirements, but we can definitely signpost you to organisations that can help. We have a conference every year called Data Fest, which really is the idea there is to bring those communities together, bring those different stakeholder groups together. And there's an opportunity there when we talk about talent for you as an organisation, if you want to recruit that top level talent in Scotland, to engage with them, to showcase your organisation and why your organisation would be a great and exciting place to come and work in. And we can connect you in a very cost effective way with that talent. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is so Data Fest usually for us every year is a kind of 2-week physical event in March. As we're all aware, we've all had to adjust and adapt recently in the last 18 months. So this year for us, it's a 9-month-long festival and conference with multiple opportunities to engage with those stakeholders. We kicked it off in March. We've just had our first key event in May. And we've got another couple of events coming up in September, October, followed by our kind of finale in November. In September, October, September's theme is Our People. So it's really focusing on data and AI and how us as individuals create a massive data every day. We also consume a massive data every day. So typical sponsors involved in that sort of space will come as no surprise. So we've got our NHS, our medical and public sector heavily involved in talking and showcasing stories of what they've done this year with data. Also our AI strategy work with Scottish Government will come up there, but there's many opportunities there to surface what you do as an organisation. And then again, it will come as no surprise. We have COP26 in Glasgow this year. We're lucky enough to be hosting. So our event in October is Our Planet and has a climate theme to it there as well. And we basically mix both local showcasing and also international key speakers to engage with an audience of students, of businesses, of data professionals and potential employers and public sector. Next slide, please. So again, I won't go into all this detail. I believe these slide decks are available to you after the event. So, what I would say is you're more than welcome to reach out to myself directly if you've got any follow-up questions. But we have a myriad of opportunities to engage you with Scotland's data and AI community, if that's something that would be of interest to find out a little bit more about. Or even if you want to, one of the great benefits this year of us having a primarily virtual event is that international audiences can join very easily, right? So if this is something that you'd be interested in seeing, I'm more than happy to provide a code for attendee tickets for you to attend some of these events and just get a feel for the kind of culture, the values, the way we engage with the community and how we drive activity. Next slide, please. Yeah, so really one of the last things I would just leave with you is I joined the Data Lab from 25 years in a commercial environment of global data analytics businesses, primarily heavy experience in automotive and financial services. One of the things that strikes me having joined the Data Lab is when I have discussions with internationally based organizations like yourself, how many of them potentially already have a footprint within the UK, but they're still interested in talking to us in Scotland because they see that in Scotland, the community is strong enough and our size is conducive to you being able to get things done, to actually make progress and get things done. So I'll leave you with that thought. My details are there. You'll see the content. Like I say, we're here to support. So if you have anything, any queries, anything I can help with, please reach out.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much for the presentation, especially as you mentioned about COP26. That's the flagship project that's going to happen later this year. So yeah, really keen to see the interest coming up from the Americas regarding and around that particular event. So next is Graham Hudson, who is our business development leader for Innovative Investment. So over to you, Graham.
Excellent. Thank you, Usman. Yeah, so it's great to have this opportunity to connect today. I think it's probably one of the benefits of the move towards a virtual world is there's a lot more appetite for these types of activities. So yeah, it's great to connect over several thousand miles and exchange ideas and insights. So looking forward to the Q&A. And thank you for the opportunity to present as well today. Just really building on what Karen's mentioned from Scotland is, and Mark has just said there, just like to say a few words from an SDI perspective, some of the investment trends that we're seeing in the tech space. As Usman said at the beginning, I work with colleagues across the globe. So whilst I'm based here in Edinburgh, work with companies from all over who are interested in setting up across Scotland. So first of all, we saw a shift over the last couple of years of firms who, when originally looking at the UK market does tend to be very attractive for a lot of companies, particularly firms in the US, but also in Europe. And quite often the UK and London became interchangeable as being the same thing, and a lot of companies would flock there. And as Melina mentioned at the outset, there's good reasons for being in London. However, companies were exploring the potential of, okay, does it make sense to maybe look at other locations in the UK? And that is certainly the case. You might expect us to say that, but I think for those in particular industries, it really makes sense to look at alternative locations as part of a growth within the UK market. So that's something that we saw first of all with startups in London. So companies who'd started in London originally and were growing, and we're starting to hit some of those challenges around talent attraction and retention that we've touched on a couple of times already this morning. But also from a cost perspective as well, companies that are looking at other roles that weren't necessarily customer facing, and we're exploring the potential of locating those elsewhere. So we've certainly seen quite a few firms in the tech space and looking to create software development teams, particularly in areas like fintech that's been referenced a couple of times, and now space is one of the emerging areas that Karen touched on as well. So just a couple of examples over the last few years. One fintech called Modular set up an office in Edinburgh a couple of years ago now, and that was quite interesting because it wasn't so much around to that digital and technical talent. They were looking to essentially move the centre of gravity away from London and develop that in Scotland. So they started with around 20 people a couple of years ago and have now grown quite rapidly to around 140 now across a number of roles. And they're doing very well within Edinburgh and looking to grow further. And then more recently, we've seen a lot more interest from international firms. So of course, many firms from the US, but also from Asia as well and elsewhere across Europe. And again, going on a similar journey, but also looking to tap into that real university R&D expertise that both Karen and Mark have touched on. And certainly within Scotland, we're sort of very proud of our university capability, both in terms of that deep research that the teams can assist within these universities, but also the talent that produces. So what we've seen is companies looking at a UK market entrance, but also combining that with an R&D centre as well. So a few firms there. And if we just look onto the next slide, just look at a couple of examples. One, user testing, again, quite interesting because they were a strong connection with the University of Edinburgh in particular in this case, and we're looking for a base to not just from a technical perspective, but to grow out their European operations. So now have quite a large footprint in Edinburgh with over 130 roles, and recently added 70 just last year. And that's a range of functions from tech, but also sales as well, and the customer support roles. And then on the smaller side, we're seeing inquiries from real tech and deep tech companies who are probably not as close to market, or particularly those in the B2B space, who are looking more from an R&D perspective. And one example would be Raza Technologies, so a company that was born in Berlin, and has since expanded to the US and is now growing in Scotland. Again, they already had a connection with the university in Scotland, and we're keen to really build on that. So developing a small hub. I think it really builds on what Mark in particular mentioned there, was the capability within the university base within Scotland, but also the ability to navigate that as well. So that's really helping to drive a lot of interest from companies who are interested in looking beyond London in particular, and exploring what else the UK has to offer, and in particular Scotland. And just on the next slide, I'd just like to say a few words in terms of some of the support that the SDI can provide. So as I mentioned, we've got a team across the world, including our colleagues in the US who you're meeting today. And the type of support that we provide to companies does range quite dramatically. So we work with early stage startups right through to large corporates. And as you can imagine, the support that those firms require does vary quite dramatically. So from a practical perspective, it can be things as straightforward as, okay, can you give me some pointers around where's a good place to set up? What's the best way to try and attract talent? What are the key industries within Scotland? Who are the key players to connect into? All types of questions we can help to, and to be honest, we're probably on the phone to Karen as well with some of those questions to help point us in the right direction as well. But I'd just like to dive into two of these areas in particular, just very briefly around the accessing R&D expertise and building a team. So on the next slide, we'll have a quick look at the R&D side first of all. So a seamless link from Mark's presentation there. We've got Data Lab up top, provides great service on particularly around the data and AI expertise, as Mark covered deeply there. But also other organisations that, again, we all work very closely together, and for particularly firms who are looking for a slightly wider pocket of expertise within the university base. So it might be that there's a core data and AI component to that, but there could be something else to that function as well. So to give one live example, currently working with a company who are really interested in education. So there's a strong AI component to that project, but they're really interested in speaking to experts within education itself around building out their platform and something that can be really engaging. So this is a really good opportunity to work with that wider base to pull in experts from different fields and have real genuine collaboration there. And then on the second side, building a team, quite often critical, if not the most important thing that people are doing, especially for early stage companies where it's very important to get that right from day one, because attracting the best people is not easy anywhere, but also keeping them is just as important as well. So particularly as Karen mentioned and Mark have both touched on, there are lots of programs to make sure that there's a strong pipeline of talent coming through universities that have that industry-focused experience and expertise, for example, with the Data Labs Masters program, which is excellent, but also Code Clan, again, as Karen mentioned, a really good program to reskill people who have maybe had some experience previously with coding and related skills, but are keen to get back into the industry and producing lots and lots of great talent that companies are snapping up on the other side. But also as well, sometimes there can be an international dimension, whether it's somebody within the team itself is maybe critical to setting up the operation. Quite a lot of our conversations can be with our colleagues in Talent Scotland, who can provide that support for individuals and companies who are looking to come in from overseas and other markets. So particularly around visas, I think regardless of where you are in the world, is always an interesting topic and something to seek some advice on, so can certainly help there. So that was very much a whistle-stop overview of just two areas that SDI can help with. But I think to reinforce the point that, again, Mark and Karen have made is there's a huge amount happening within Scotland, and I'm sure it's the same in Portland and Oregon as well. And I think quite often just having those people who can help connect you and signpost you to key individuals and organisations is often very important, both in terms of trying to provide those relevant and practical links that will go somewhere, but also from a speed perspective as well. So yeah, I'll leave you with that, and really keen to connect and to learn more about your ecosystem as well, and how things are going, and if there are opportunities to learn from one another as well. And yeah, of course, if you're interested in learning more, happy to pick up a conversation as well alongside my colleagues. I'll hand back to Usman. Thank you.
Thanks, Ram. Thank you very much for the presentation. And next up is my colleague, Jonathan Lewis, who's based in San Jose. So over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Usman. Hello, everyone. I know that you've had a lot of information thrown on you, so I'm just going to quickly tie a bow on everything. A couple of things that I was thinking about listening to everybody else speak. For a public government agency, I'm always amazed at how both agile our organizations and our public bodies tend to be, and how committed they are. When you think about the things like COP26 coming up, they really, when they commit to something, they really do commit to it. But obviously you can have all the resources in the world, all of these fantastic opportunities, but they don't really mean much to you sitting in Oregon if you can't access them. And so there's also a strong commitment, as you can see from our international presence, to bring this to you. So whether it's my colleagues Usman in Calgary, or Melina in Houston, or myself in the Bay Area, you can consider us sort of your single access point to everything that you've heard from the other folks on the call today. So really, it's just to sort of highlight that we know it can be difficult to navigate. There's a lot available, and like my colleagues have said, we support everything from startups to, you know, large established multinational companies. I just want to highlight everything that all the services that we offer are completely complimentary and confidential, and they're also bespoke to solving the problems that you have and the solutions that you're looking for, because we do really want our inward investors and partners to succeed. So, you know, obviously you can reach out to any of the folks today directly if you have something specific for them, but if you have any other general inquiries, you know, I could be your first point of contact as the person who's closest to Oregon and very much enjoys Oregon and would love to get up and see you in person if the opportunity arises. This slide just sort of goes over the sorts of things we do, both on the trade side and bringing Scottish companies out here, which, you know, we have a wealth of talent and knowledge back in Scotland that can help you also if you're looking for trade partners, or if you're trying to figure out, if you're considering inward investment in Scotland, how you fit into that existing ecosystem, whether it's the fintech, you know, the fintech base we have there, or just sort of, you know, cybersecurity, whatever it is, we can sort of provide you a map of what's there, where do you slide into the supply chain, who are the folks you'd be working with, make those introductions. And then obviously you've heard a lot from Graham and the other folks about how we can support you in inward investment. So I'd say that's all I really have for you today, and I'll open it up to everyone so that we can get on with the Q&A, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Hi, Jonathan. I did have one question come in, and I think it might be nice to highlight, and it's open to anyone who'd like to answer. But the question was, can you tell us more about COP26 and what exactly this is?
I guess yeah, I'm unmuted, so I'll take it. So COP26, you're gonna have to remind me what it stands for, but it's the Global Climate Summit that happens, and so it's happening this fall, I believe in November. Is that right? And
yep, November 1st to the 12th.
Yeah, and Glasgow is the host, and so obviously we're in a climate emergency, and both governments and the private sector are trying to move heaven and earth to try to meet the challenge of our times. And so the Scottish government and all of the both public and private institutions around it have sort of amassed this massive effort to try to bring the world together to solve these challenges. And so we see that backed in, for example, our funding mechanisms. Right now we have an open call out for funding for green job initiatives for investment into Scotland. So we really see both Scottish enterprise and Scottish government putting not just walking the walk but talking the talk, in terms of, like I said before, when they commit to something, really committing to it wholeheartedly. That's something obviously that the conference itself, you'll be able to participate virtually, and there's a ton of activity going on throughout the week and around it. And we can provide connections to that if there's further interest in participating.
Awesome. And thank you, Karen. By the way, guys, there's a bit more updates on COP26 in the chat for those who were wondering. And if you guys do have other questions that you want to send via the chat, that would be great. And I'm scrolling through here. Some of these are direct to me, so some of them.
I was going to say, we also, Mary, if you want to unmute, since we're a small crowd and we can all chat as more of a roundtable.
Yeah, no, that's great. I put a couple of questions in the chat. I have several questions. One on salaries, one on how do those compare? One on like what's the broadband infrastructure? Also for that Innovate UK, you said you had done a couple of applications. What type of application? Can you just describe what those are? And the data classes. Is that something that people outside the country can participate in? They sounded pretty interesting. And my final one, I know I'm giving you a bunch of questions. You can figure out who's the right one to answer. The final one is one that I'm very interested in answer. We have a UK entity already. We have offices in Ireland, we in London. And I'm wondering, can I add, like, we're building our data team and, data solution offerings. And, I'm sitting here thinking, well, can I just hire a couple of people in Scotland and have them be part of my UK corporation that I already have in existence? Is that like a thing? And it sounds to me like, oh, that might be super easy to do, but you have to tell me, is that super easy to do or not? Because if so, it's pretty interesting. And I am actually going to be over in Ireland and UK for 5 weeks, September and the first week of October. And we're also bringing over the woman who heads up this data area for us. And it might be, if that's a thing and it's easy, maybe it would be worth popping over, and looking at potentially what we might be able to take advantage of there.
Absolutely. I can take the salary question and I'll send my information directly to you. But if there's certain positions, like you already know exactly what kind of positions or area that you're really interested in, that you would say, hey, you know what, Scotland's going to answer this call. We'll be glad to do some benchmarking for those positions, especially one to be a little bit more bespoke. Every area in Scotland too has slightly different ranges. So again, if you want to do a comparison, let's say if you said you're in Ireland, if you're in Dublin versus what it would be like in Glasgow, we can do those particulars for you so that you have a good idea of like, okay, this is how it compares. And we can do it all in pounds, or if you're looking to do euros, we can do it all in euros, however it is that would best work out for you. Perfect. And I'll get with you immediately, like afterwards, with my contact information, so we can get that bespoke info to you.
Okay.
And then I don't know if Grant, if you did want to speak a little bit about maybe visiting or inward visits, maybe if they're happening in September, October.
Yeah, certainly. I think we would fingers crossed. I had my first COVID jab today, so hopefully we'll be in a good place by then, and I won't say back to normal, but yeah, hopefully it'll be good progress. It'll be good to meet you in person if you're coming over, Mary. I suppose in terms of your other questions, the broadband and internet connectivity is certainly strong in the central belt. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the geography of Scotland, but essentially the 80% of the population live within the sort of the mainly around Glasgow, Edinburgh, and up towards Aberdeen. So you can imagine very strong across those parts. And there's been a huge push to increase broadband connectivity across the Highlands and Islands as well. Seems to be a key component to access or for people in those regions to access work and opportunities, and that's obviously become even more important in the climate we find ourselves in just now. Yeah. In terms of accessing the programs, or if I'm Mark, do you want to come in on the Innovate question just now?
Yes, I thought, was there a question there, Mary, about the data courses?
Well, there was two questions. One was on the data courses, are those for internal only, or is like that something accessible to, my staff, for instance? Sure. But the other one was, you mentioned the Innovate UK, you help with applications for to apply for programs within the UK, and that you'd helped with 4 applications. And I was just wondering, like, for example, what type of applications, what type of programs, or are you accessing in that way?
There's a wide range there. If it data and AI related, and we have an approach by an organization who wants some help in that area, we'll help. We cover a wide remit. We're not restricted to a particular sector, and we cover across the board. So maybe not a particularly relevant example, but one that's in the forefront of my mind, because I'm waiting for an overdue announcement on it. But we supported a consortium looking to actually repeat the data lab model in Northern Ireland, specifically for a sector in manufacturing. So we kind of help them with that. But there's a wide range, Mary, there of multiple things, depending on what the challenge calls are that come out from government that they want people to focus on. You'll see obviously a lot in climate this year, I would expect. We have a bit of a funny time at the moment. There's a hiatus because as we've come out of Europe and some of the funding for innovation came from Europe, the government is kind of just pausing and reflecting on what they potentially need to do to fill the gaps there. So at the moment, we've got less calls out than we typically would normally have, but we expect to see it turn around in the next few months. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
And I think for the data courses side of it, I think we are surfacing that content at the moment, like I said, part of the Skills Development Scotland Modern Apprenticeships pilot. We have plans to work with, like I say, a North American university to go in partnership with them and make that content available. So we're probably several months away from that just now, but I'm more than happy to let you know once that's up and give you an understanding how you can access it directly if that helps.
Yeah, they sounded very interesting.
And I think, yeah, and once to your point there, Mary, if you decided you wanted to set up some sort of presence in Scotland, obviously that opens the gateway to involving you a lot more closely with some of the stuff on the ground in Scotland as well, whether it be that leadership piece or whatever it may be.
And so how easy is that, given that we have a UK company already? And
I will pass that across to the SDI guys who are far more informed than I am on that.
Yeah, I think that the short answer is it's pretty straightforward. To be honest, it's not uncommon for a company registered in England to have employees based in Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland. It's pretty difficult, to be honest. You don't have to create entities in each of the jurisdictions. And just to build on Mark's point in terms of the funding support, within our organisation, we have some small funds looking at R&D type projects that are very similar to the Innovate UK funds. So maybe it just feels like there's maybe a conversation to be had around the focus of those funds and the opportunity to build a small team and what that might look like in a more rounded view. So it's probably a conversation we can pick up offline and explore that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds good. What's in the picture? The slide that's up.
Kelpies,
The
the kelp
Kelpies, you're,
over in Falkirk. Yeah.
it's a statue, and there's two canals in Scotland that like link the east and the west, and they meet in Falkirk. And my understanding is that the Kelpies were horses that used to pull the barges along the sides of the canals. So as a tribute to the Kelpies, as they're called, these massive statues have been created. So quite the scene. They're a lot bigger than they look there, and they look pretty big.
They look enormous, and they look like just fantastic. I mean, you know, how amazing. Yeah, well, this is really helpful. I hadn't really, you know, in the past, of course, the Ireland Development Agency and, you know, Manufacturing Center, and I for decades have engaged there, and certainly in London and the UK, you know, for a very long time. But Scotland hadn't been on my radar at all, which is one of the reasons that, you know, when I saw this come across, I thought, oh, you know, need to figure out what's happening there if they're kind of outside. And so the data and AI and, you know, like it's really helpful to understand what it is you guys are about and what you're doing and kind of the opportunity there. And, you know, I think it's really cool. And I love that it's so, you know, it isn't just economic, it's also social good.
Yeah.
Right? Like for the country, for the people, that it has that built into the fabric of everything you're talking about. I think that, you know, that's very aligned with my, you know, what's important to me personally, and also that, you know, we're putting forth in the world and from the company. So that's really, really cool.
You know, Mary, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it reminded me of something I was going to highlight that was briefly touched on earlier, but I forgot to mention was, you know, we know that it's all about talent these days, and you talk to any country's economic or region's economic development agency in the world, and they're all going to say the same. We're super proud of our universities. We have the best talent, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing, and I don't have a slide or the data in front of me, but one thing that I think does stand out a bit is retention of talent. There's actually, I think we have a quote somewhere that I've seen in a presentation from an inward investor that said something like astonishingly low turnover among the tech scene, which we know that, you know, it's not just about acquiring it. There's so much cost in and so much value in keeping it. And that's something that I haven't really quite figured out what it is about Scotland that people that there tends to be lower turnover, but I think that's something that is almost undervalued in our offering when we talk about what the value in hiring people in Scotland.
Yeah, that's gotten more and more critical. Just this, you know, kind of post-COVID, there's a real worker shortage. There's a real, people are, you know, there's a lot of articles about people jumping jobs. The great, I forget what they call it, not the great, there's a term that I've seen thrown out about people quitting their job, you know, and either leaving the workforce or, you know, jumping companies. There's just a real difficulty with that particular issue right now.
Yeah.
And of course, in the US, there's still this subsidized unemployment of $300 a week for workers kind of maybe at the lower end of the pay scale. And like, you can't find people to work because they're getting paid more on, you know, at least through September in many states on unemployment than you could offer as a job. And, you know, I mean, like who questions that really? I mean, you can't blame them. So, man, staffing is a big issue. We actually have a 500 person plus field service technician staff across the country. And in fact, we provide global technical services really across the world. Apple, we provide services for Apple across the entire globe, and we have W2 employees in, you know, US, Canada, Mexico, UK, Ireland, for that purpose. And then we operate through partners for 90 countries. You know, we probably have a partner that services Scotland, would be my guess, and in, you know, many, many languages. And boy, it is really challenging retention is a big part of the economic equation for that group of people, right? A lot of them are part-time. Most of them are part-time actually. And, you know, they're kind of this on-call workforce, but it's really, really challenging. And we have very high quality standard, right? It's a very premium service. So it's
Exactly.
really, yeah, it's really difficult, but it's good. It just means you have to pay more right now. All the costs are going up. You know, Jonathan, I'm also, I think there's something that we want to follow up on, certainly on the data side, that, you know, this data, you know, an extended workforce for this new team we have up and going, even if it's engaging with interns or a research project, or, you know, potentially even hiring people there. I am going to be in the Bay Area the 14th, 15th, 16th. So in 2 weeks, I'll be bumping around San Jose. So if it's worthwhile to get together, you know, for an hour or something and have a chat about that, we could do that.
I don't know what the company line is on in-person meetings, but I'm more than 2 weeks post second vaccine, so it can be a little secret. But yes, I'd be happy to
long
meet.
past second vaccine. I think I'm months now past second vaccine. So yeah, we can connect separately on that if that's of interest. I mean, I think relationships are super important, right? Yeah, we wouldn't violate any policies, of course, or any laws or rules, or, you know, you always have to check on the latest and greatest because things move so quickly now. 2 weeks from now, it could even be different rules than it is today, actually. So we always just verify that on any meetings, but there are some customer meetings that we are, you know, I mean, that's reason to go down, right? So
yeah.
Some people are various degrees of open, but I don't want to, I appreciate all of your time. This has been really wonderful. So thank you too much.
Absolutely, Mary. I think we're all more than keen to help out where we can. And if we can make this happen, even better. I don't see any other new questions, and I'm cognizant of everyone's time. It's late over in Scotland. So if there aren't any other questions, I think we can wrap it up for today. Riley, just in case, is there any other updates from TAO that maybe we need to run through, or are we good to go?
I was just going to do a quick thank you to all of y'all and the whole team at SDI, the folks that were able to join us. Riley's going to put y'all's contact information in the chat. So if there's any additional questions, people can get in touch. And then we have recorded this, so we'll have it available for view. And we thank everybody for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at future TAO events. And don't hesitate to contact us directly if you have any questions about membership, programming, or engagement, or you want to do a follow-up with the folks from SDI, and we can help facilitate that. But outside of that, that was awesome. I just learned a ton.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening, great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Stay safe.